So let me say just a little to set the scene. As the world turns into a smaller, more interconnected and interdependent space, we're witnessing surely some of the biggest shifts in our history. Three major disruptive trends seem to us at Cisco to be shaping this world in particular: globalization, demographics, and technology. Globalization, meaning that wherever you work, there is a battle to establish the economic value of what you do. So many patents are concentrated in such a small number of countries. Demographics, a vastly increasing population. We've just hit 7 billion, notoriously, but it doesn't look the same everywhere, does it? Sometimes rising older populations, sometimes growing younger populations, and the need always to figure out how we can sustain such a vast increase in our numbers. And technology, again, so many extraordinary inventions, breakthroughs coming to reshape our worlds of leisure and also of employment. Well, if all that's going on, what's the impact on the way that we live and that we work? Well, baby boomers, we see, going into retirement, and a larger flux of migrants looking for jobs outside their home country. Workers remaining active and productive well beyond standard retirement ages. People changing employers time and time again during their professional career without a true loyalty to any particular one. A real boom in consultant and freelance workers. An expectation of people being able to work anywhere, at any time, and through any mobile device, the virtual global worker. Employers asking that their workers be highly adaptable and flexible to constant market and organizational changes. Employers expecting individuals to be able to collaborate and cooperate across their organization and with people across many other organizations. And people adjusting more and more to working day by day in multicultural international teams spread right across the globe in multiple time zones. And very much from my point of view and the places where I work, individuals being asked to use the very latest internet technologies in order to operate in a completely virtual working environment. In my life, I've seen this set of issues from three different perspectives. First, working at the BBC, as responsible for education, and then latterly for the BBC's factual programs, and figuring out how the BBC could use all of its assets, video and audio, to drive a digital curriculum for kids in the UK. Later in the civil service in the UK as Director of Education Strategy, and now at Cisco, driving Cisco's education business right around the world, selling technologies into K through 12, but also higher education systems, but always thinking, as we were reminded this morning by Her Highness, about what the technology is for. What are the learning outcomes that you really want? And as these things come together now in Cisco, we begin to think about the real skills that we need from young people coming to work for this international company. And we've recently done some work on just that. And we boil them down really into three families. What we're looking for, people coming to work as part of the 70,000 strong Cisco family around the world. The first things that we're looking for, I guess, are what are typically now called 21st century skills. I think they've always been pretty important. Maybe it's just that we need them particularly in the 21st century, but this is critical thinking, collaboration, communication, creativity, the 4 C's. Critically, I think, complex problem solving, the ability to solve the hardest problems in real time, often with others, with different learning approaches, and of course, a proficiency in ICT. That's the first set of things, 21st century skills. The second, we think, is global leadership skills, a global mindset, a proficiency in languages, cultural awareness, being a team player, the ethics of the work situation. And these are demanding skills, but we're clear that they're increasingly required. And entrepreneurial skills, the third group, the ability to assess and take risks, to self-direct, ambition, initiative, planning, persuasion, resourcefulness. People sometimes say to me, hang on, were you ever 21 yourself? Did you have all these things when you first showed up in the world of work? Of course, the answer is no. But I think the reality is that we can't wait very long these days before people begin to work in this way and bring these capabilities to bear on the working situation. And frankly, we are often wanting to put people in their mid to later 20s into positions of real global responsibility, so these things count. So, I now want to pause, and I want, if I may, to invite to the stage our distinguished speakers who are going to drive the conversation with me over the next few minutes. So first, immediately on my left, I want to introduce Aref Husseini, General Director of Al-Nazaq. For the past 12 years, Aref has worked in fields of industry and education. In 2003, he founded Al-Nazaq to drive forward scientific innovation in Palestine. He's built a hugely successful organization. It's recognized by the NGO community in Palestine. It's entered into partnerships to serve over 20,000 children, young people. Ultimately, Al-Nazaq education programs will contribute to economic growth in Palestine through building new industry and investment opportunities. Aref in 2008 was chosen by Syngas Foundation in the United States as one of 22 Arab social innovators. And in 2010, I understand he registered his third product patent and established a company called PAL Invent Co. to help take Al-Nazaq's innovations to market. And to my far left, Ponce Ernest Samaniego, who's co-founder and CEO of Outliers. Outliers is a social enterprise that brings outsourced business expertise to non-profits in the Philippines. Ponce co-founded Outliers during his senior year at the Business Administration program of the University of the Philippines, and Outliers is effectively turning charities into sustainable social enterprises. Outliers was named Philippines winner out of 156 social businesses in the BID Network and Citibank's Business in Development Challenge 2010. Ponce is a British Council global changemaker. After WISE, he heads straight to Vienna to represent the changemakers at the 2011 Global Social Business Summit. And he's currently working with the College of Business Administration at the University of the Philippines to incorporate social entrepreneurship into its curriculum. So welcome both of you. I'll just say a little, if I may, about our format today. The idea is that we will perhaps discuss for 20, 25 minutes or so some of the issues that seem central to the thesis that we have here this morning. And then I'd like to open it up. And I'd like to open it up really by asking you to throw questions at us in one of two ways, either live, the old way, or if you want, you can use the technology, and I think you all have ways of getting to us, and I will find on my iPad over there the questions that you're throwing to us. I don't know whether you've seen on the screen how you do that. I'm hoping that you've got some information either now or beforehand, but you should be able to use, I think, the MyWise and Twitter platforms to do so. You should also, if you want, ensure your headphone is working properly and that you can go through this session in the language of your choice. So, without more ado, if I may, I'll turn to Aref Husseini, General Director of Al-Nazaq in Palestine. Aref, your organization is very heavily involved in developing innovative approaches and a new culture of scientific innovation among young people. Do you feel that school systems are failing to ignite creativity and in that way to prepare young people for the world of work that we've begun to describe here?
Thank you, Mike. I just have one comment before answering the question. Please, if you are here, so let us hear your voice. So we don't need to use technology when we are face to face. And this will lead us to the common discussion about technology, education, innovation, creativity. Actually, I don't know if schools failed in that. I think they didn't start yet, especially in our educational system in Palestine and I think in the region. You know, our educational system is still depending on memorizing content and passing exams. So, if you are asking about creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship, I think the average schools in our region, I'm not talking about international schools, about public, private, average schools in our system, they are not in this field at all because of the structure of our system, which depends on passing one exam after 12 years of learning materials, disciplines. You know, you can see our students going to the schools with the 12 different books, textbooks, which coming from one source. It's not about skills, it's about knowledge, about information. And when this information revolution that we are living here, education really now in our country and in our region miss the main goal for building the skills for future work or future jobs. So if the schools motivating critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, innovation in education, everyone is talking about this. You know, in our Ministry of Education, and I assume in other ministries of education, if you are asking anybody in the system, what you think about education, he or she will tell you the same speech. Critical thinking, problem solving, innovation and creativity, student centralization. We have to move from teacher centralization to student centralization. We have to use modern technologies in teaching and learning. But in fact, when you are going to a small village and you get into one of the classrooms, you will find the same teaching way that used to be before 60 years.
So what's going to change it? What's going to take it from a speech to a different way of doing schools for real children?
You know, this is one of our problems that when we want a change, we're starting from the end. Now we are starting from recognition and awards and ceremonies about innovation in education. Everyone wants to pick up a fruit from a tree which doesn't exist at all. You know, to have innovation in the educational system which can lead you to entrepreneurs and other kind of job creation, you have to start from early age to really work with teachers before students and future teachers before future students to start thinking outside of the box. And the main issue, we should change the educational system to be more open, less centralized, and to give the opportunity for all students to be talented if they want. You know, if you have a kid, Michael, and in our country, it's not in the UK, in the Middle East, in MENA region, let's say, okay? And he is really talented in writing applications, in programming application for mobile systems. And he is really working on this. And on the other day, he has an exam on history about a battle which you know, you have to memorize all of the dates and names. Most probably, you are a well-educated parent, you are really believing in technology, you are believing in innovation and creativity, but because of the system, you will ask him to leave what he is doing and go to memorize because the other day he has exam and he should pass it.
Yes. Well, the most dramatic approach to new forms of teaching and learning that I've seen working at Cisco was at the New York High School in Manhattan, where we became involved about 4 years ago. But it did mean real daring and change. It meant, for one thing, throwing out the traditional curriculum and the idea of 7 or 8 lessons a day, and it meant cutting the year for a whole cohort of 14-year-old students into 6. And each part was devoted over 7 or 8 weeks to a very complex problem, like how are genetic diseases transmitted, or how do you go about rebuilding the southern tip of Manhattan, interdisciplinary work, bringing in experts live and remote to support aspects of the learning. And at the end of it, it becomes a complex project projected back to the internet, full of rich digital media, putting forward policy solutions to problems. And building on that at Cisco, we began to think about what we came to call Education 3.0, which was saying everything needs to be about equipping young people with these higher order capabilities that you've been describing very well. But if you want that, you will need to rethink all of the other struts of the education system. You know, the teaching and learning techniques, the way in which you train your workforce, leadership, and then all of those issues around governance and management and metrics. And it's led us to believe that it is a very profound challenge that we're talking about if we're to really prioritize these higher order capabilities. And it won't be done in a day, but only by a systematic approach to education system reform. And I wonder what you think the potential is for that kind of systematic approach here in this region and in your own country, Palestine.
You know, in Palestine we are far away from this, but in other countries I see there is a change. You know, we can talk about not really in the Middle East, but Malaysia, for example, Singapore, and other countries who did this jump during 10 years or 12 years. The most important aspects to focus on here is the mentality and the culture around the society which related to education. Now, why people going to be educated? Why they are attending schools and universities? In the end of the day, they want to find a job. At least in our country, this is the process, you know, to spend 12 years in a school directly, no even 1 year rest to go to the university, directly, immediately after that to learn. This is the skills that we are teaching our fresh graduates, how to write their CVs and to apply to companies. And traditional companies in our countries, which focusing on a production actually for traditional products, seeking engineers who can repeat exactly what others did during the last 50 years. This is the situation. Now, to have the change, we have to be more open-minded in our educational system by policy. There is 2 ways to do that. One is driven by state, that you are coming, changing the educational system, putting a new policies to what kind of fresh graduates you want after 16 years investing in the educational system, which is far away from our reality in the region because of the lack of resources. Because to have a change, it costs money. It needs different kind of expertise and different kind of understanding for the future graduates. So what needed in this case, when you face the lack of resources, from my point of view, is to start to work with a small group in the country, no more than 1 to 2% of the students, to have this change and to create a success stories which can be role models in the society. That we are now working in Al Nizak to do that in Palestine through the last at least 8 or 9 years, and now we start to pick up the fruits. And then with creating the role model, you can convince the policymakers to have this change. By slogans, it's very easy to convince who are convinced that it is convincing. Okay. What we are trying to do is to prove to the convinced that it's worth it.
Good. Well, I want to come back to you about how you apply all of this in the region. But first of all, I want to come to Ponce and see whether we can get a picture of what this 21st century entrepreneur really looks like. So first of all, just say a little about your own background, Ponce. and Outliers, what it does and how you got involved in it.
So first of all, I'd like to say how humbled I am to be representing Learner's Voice, and how firmly I believe in this initiative that we students are part of this discussion on WISE. So I hope I do them proud. But enough about them. Let's start talking about me.
Exactly, yeah.
So it was just more than a year ago when, together with a group of other students from my university, we started helping out NGOs because they needed help. In a country where about almost 30% is the poverty rate, these NGOs really do good work. They help out in health, they fight human trafficking, they empower the youth. But these selfless servants also need help, and we just felt that we can provide it. So we business students say that we are in the service of those who serve. We empower them with market-based approaches, with marketing, finance, whatever basically they need. So now we are funded by Starbucks Foundation, by Visayan Forum Foundation, which is a local NGO, and the Philippine Business for Social Progress, and of course, the Global Changemakers Program.
So you did it. And from your perspective, as a graduate of all of that, what needs to be done to make entrepreneurship more attractive and more exciting to people across this region so that people will follow in your footsteps?
Well, let me tell you the story of a first date I had about just 3 months ago. So I was on a date talking about what I do and passionately about the outliers. Then my date said, isn't this what you're doing because you can't get into PNG? So then I completely agree with what Mr. Husseini said, how it's a mindset and how it's not cool to my peers, at least. Coming here in Qatar, for example, I was greeted with a woman holding a WISE placard.
What happened with the date?
I was greeted by by a Filipina holding the WISE placard, and to the hotel with Filipinos there and amazing Filipinos working here in Qatar. And it just shows that it shows the statistic that 10% of the Philippine population, or nearly 9 million, are abroad to find work elsewhere. Because in the Philippines, job creation isn't a priority for most. In fact, my mother is part of that statistic. When I was 3 years old, she left, and she is a registered social worker from a good university, but now currently works as a factory worker in Japan. I guess it is about setting, we are called outliers, by the way, because we felt like random statistical errors, everybody wanting to do things that way, and we felt like, what the hell, we are mistakes, apparently. So, but it's just a funny way for us to tell that story, that we wanted to do something different. So I guess breaking the mindset. But I would like to point out this aspect of entrepreneurship that is very important. I guess when I started accepting that, fine, I have to do this because now I'm here in WISE. But the acceptance of failure and how it's okay, because I watched this TED Talk about education, and this guy, I'd love to quote him, but I can't find him again, the video. So, but what he was talking about was the educational system, how it was rewarding failure, and how it was creating more students that probably are afraid of failing, because when you create intelligent mistakes, you aren't rewarded. Instead, you are punished, and I guess that's what's happening in the Philippines.
Thank you. So, Arif, if you apply that thinking to this region, people say, I mean, the numbers differ, but maybe we need to prepare people for 75 million jobs. Her Highness said 50, but these are high figures, whatever they are. Now, can you imagine replicating the kind of experience that Ponce has been talking about? Not everybody has to be an entrepreneur, not everybody's got to make $1 million, but can you imagine creating an environment in which young people do come through great schools, do acquire these higher order capabilities, do find ways to open up entrepreneurship and go into business? Is that achievable at the scale that's needed?
Yes. Yeah. Uh, we need a deep belief in high risk, high return.
Mhm.
When I left the high tech, I used to work in a very fancy company as senior engineer. And when I took this high risk to reach the high return, and I said, okay, I want to create jobs, not to seek for job, to seek a job. My ex-wife in that time said, you must be crazy, you know, to leave a company with a very nice salary, as senior engineer, you know, it's respectable in our society. No one will call you by your name. All of the people will call you as engineer X, Y, Z. And to go to create jobs for other people through social entrepreneurship or now through industrial entrepreneurship that I have. And in that time, I worked to register my last patent for user product. And everyone laughed on that. Because when you have something as a result of the traditional path of education, it not necessarily will lead you to create jobs. And now in our region, the employers are government or traditional private sector, and it's done. How much they can hire new employees. You know, government in Palestine, they have 150,000 employees, most of them in the security branch, so they are earning less than the average salary in any country. And the private sector working in traditional production, so as well, how much they can go forward in this. Now, to create new jobs, it needs a real entrepreneurship that connected to the interest of the people. You could not just come and say, I have a dream I want to achieve. It should be connected to the daily life of people, to the improvement of lives, and to a real need in the society, which bring you to the problem-solving skills. Education, I'm returning to education because I have a very nice story on this, because they kicked me out from school when I was in the second grade. My teacher in that time asked, what a profit, positive things you can take from a tree. So, you know, all of the very good students, my classmates, they answered, you know, food, fruits, shadow, wood. And I said, oh, my mother really tied the rope on the tree to dry the clothes. You know, and then they said my teacher said, okay, it's against the environment. It's not really politically correct. It's not very nice question. So when I gave my argument, which related to the need of the rope and drying the clothes, the educational system could not accept that, and even the society could not accept that. So to have this change in the culture and the mind for being able to create new jobs, it's not slogans. It's not just to come and say, oh, I need 5% of the society to be entrepreneurs. Everybody can make it. No. You have to have a very long process, sophisticated one, which can lead you from having idea, having this, you know, this power, this need to success. It's not ambition. It's not willing to be willing to success. It's to have this need to success and make it, and to believe that it will be happen one day. In our societies, in our region, in MENA region, you know, the respectable one who earns more money, yes, or he has much education, not who has this opportunity to create something new. So if we want to be able to go in parallel with this demographic need, 400,000 jobs will be needed in the coming years. We have to work today to convince people to implement, not to convince people to be convinced.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, I think interesting things have come out of what the two of you have said, particularly that this notion of building your school life around solving real-world problems turns out to have enormous implications for driving an entrepreneurial mindset, because it's exactly those real-world problems that need to be attacked in professional life and to some extent monetized. And it seems to me that's what you're doing. But before we open it up to the audience, I just want to look at one other area which seems to me to be important. We've heard a great deal in recent times, and I'm sure we've all been involved in it, we three and others in this room, about the partnerships that need to be put in place, the public-private partnerships, to drive the reform of education in this sort of direction. And I think we now have many examples of what these partnerships can look like, bringing together government and education and social entrepreneurs and businesses like my own. But I wonder whether, from the lens of this region, Aref, you've seen any particular things that you think are lessons that we should hang on to, things that we shouldn't forget as we go about this kind of project in future?
Allow me to be very direct and frankly speaking. Governments should lead this process upon logics and not upon interests. Because in our countries, sharks, big companies, they are leading the state's strategies for entrepreneurship according to their interests. I'm not sure if that guy in that village who really entrepreneur has this opportunity to do something if it's not really connected to the shark's interests. And this is what happened. When we have weak governments and policies, because it's donor-driven, somehow, sometimes it's politics, conflicts, internal politics, and no one has this clear vision for how we would see our country after 20 or 30 years, like what happened in Malaysia, for example, or Singapore, or even other countries like India, China, and different countries. You don't have this vision from the government. So this brings you to a lack of trust between public sector, private sector, and now the most significant sector, which is NGOs and civil society organization. So we have first to build this trust between the three parties, and we have to find the common interest, not only one side interest in developing entrepreneurship in any country, actually.
Thank you, that's terrific. Well, let's open it up and see what issues in the hall you might want to raise with us. I'm hoping that there might be a couple of prompt questions on the iPad here, but we'll see. But as you said, Arif, the best questions are normally those that come direct from the hall. So let's see what we've got. I guess we've been talking about three areas: strengthening school systems, entrepreneurial mindsets, and then how to create effective public-private partnerships to drive the reform of education. So in any of those areas, it'd be great to have a question or two. To my right.
Yes. Thanks for a very interesting set of opening remarks. This is what I'm hearing so far, and let me tell you my problem with it. I feel like we keep going back to that same point, the same framework of NGOs being creative and innovative and driving that, and the government being too bureaucratic, too inflexible, too traditional, too uninventive. And this is problematic to me on two levels. The first is I feel like, and a lot of times, this is not a carefully assessed statement. I think sometimes NGOs can replicate exactly the kind of traditional, uncreative, uninventive practices that we accuse government of having. It's just simply too simplistic to say that. And, and at times that there are very creative things that we actually do ignore. So that's one reason why it's problematic. And the other is that it takes us back to square one, where we talk about scale. How do we scale up these really innovative initiatives that we have, and how do we get government to adopt them and so forth? So I'm just asking you as the speakers, and maybe someone in the audience, to please challenge me with maybe some kind of different framework for approaching this. Can we be creative in thinking, more creative in thinking about the framing of this problem? For example, do you see sort of any government characteristics or any openings that you see, especially now in the Arab world. This is what we're talking about. Any change, any hope maybe with the Arab Spring. I know this is not the session for it, but can we just be a little bit more creative and frame this problem differently?
Thank you. And I should have asked you just to introduce yourself, because it sounds like you have a perspective on all of this.
My name is Hanan Abdulrahim. I'm Palestinian, by the way. I'm from Qatar University. I guess I do have a perspective.
Very good. Would either of you like to have a go at that? Reinvent the paradigm in the next 45 seconds.
Thank you, Hanan. Yes, it's a phenomenon now that NGOs repeats the same mistakes that the traditional system, but they don't have to, because the traditional system, it's like a beer. It's a very big system that you could not move easily from place to place, and you could not really have a significant improvement that you can see. I could not say that in Palestine, in particular, the picture is like what you described, that the governmental system, it's weak, and the NGOs are trying to replace. No, I can say that in Palestine our problem is the lack of human resources, because we are disconnected from the world actually in terms of bringing people in. And in the human resource, we used to be the most educated people before Intifada. But now if you are going to the schools in Palestine, you see a very different reality, because of the last 20 or 30 years of struggles and conflicts and others. Yes, there is a hope. In Palestine, for example, we as NGOs, we are volunteer with the curricula, official and governmental curricula center to develop the new technology curricula. A lot of e-learning capacities coming to Palestine now to develop a new this new era. So there is a hope. The problem that when we are here and the world going very fast through technology and other policies to be very far away from us, we don't have this time to fill this gap. And this is I will challenge you with this question: what to do to fill this gap very quickly, but with saving the same quality? Our approach in Palestine is to work with a very small group to create a role model. So we will pick up the fruits in 2015. I don't know now to tell you if this model will be a success model. The indicators very positive. We are seeing a lot of improvement, but as a result of the lack of resources, we could not really tackle this issue in a very wide perspective. So we are trying to work with the minority who can make a change. 2015 very close. I would love to be in contact and to tell you what the learned lessons.
Ponce, I'm going to ask you to chip in here as well, because I thought behind the question lay this sense that the NGO doesn't have to be this fleet-footed dream that makes things happen, and governments don't always have to be bureaucratic, slow-moving. And I wondered from your perspective as a young entrepreneur how you see government. I mean, do you see government as a helpful thing, or something that, frankly, in its traditional forms, needs to be shifted into the side lane and you just steam past? How do you conceive of government?
Well, first of all, I'd like to make 2 points. First, it wasn't me who blamed the government, so no, it's a joke. Second, I can share from my experience. So, on my perspective, I don't see the government as anything negative. In fact, I know its role, and that I just realized that the system that we have isn't perfect, and that we need to create new models, and these new innovations must come from the other sector, the private sector, because the government being more or less, how do you say that, a monopolist on that area, it's not very efficient in the economic sense. It's just a natural system, right? So there needs to be other people doing it, those stuff. But on my experience, though, on how I guess I started, considering being an entrepreneur more seriously. First, I'd like to point out one public-private partnership that they did in the Philippines. There was this wealthy individual who started an initiative called Go Negosyo, which is just basically go into business. And they started, in partnership with the government, they put up entrepreneurship clubs in high schools, and they started teaching that. But the problem there then was that it was, I guess, it got lost into translation. I'm sure at the top it had a great view on entrepreneurship, but to us who were experiencing it, it was mostly us being taught how to fry pancakes because we can sell it. Although it wasn't such a big entrepreneurship idea of moving society forward or whatever. But for me, the infrastructure that pushed me forward to being where I am today is venture philanthropists like Starbucks Foundation, who believed in young people that we only had passion and persistence. We kept emailing them until they said, okay, we'll give you a little bit of funding to those and mentors that can be all of you in front of me today. In the young people you work with, I couldn't be working without Visayan Forum Foundation and Mr. Raymond Asadera, those professors, those educators like you who has helped me, who has helped students to work on, so.
Good. And just from a business perspective, I think that Cisco would have looked at all of this quite differently 10 years ago. I think we'd have thought, right, well, we'll bring some philanthropic dollars and we'll insert them in a useful place. But really, the game is being played out by the NGOs and the government and others. And I think much more now we would be likely to be saying the philanthropic element is fine and essential. We don't want to stop it. But how do we take what we learned in that sphere and put it at the heart of the business? So that, for example, as we now work with school system leaders around the world, from Korea to Finland to the USA and back into Europe, we're thinking very hard about what we can learn from what they're doing and what they need to do in order to drive the next generation of products and services from Cisco. The danger, we are a for-profit organization, and you begin to price the people who most need this out of your market. The benefit is that a company like mine, as big as it is, no longer sees education it can do in the tram lines, in the margins, but it has to come central to the whole being of the organization. So that, I think, again, is a paradigm-busting idea. But perhaps enough on that question. Shall we look for the next question? Yes. Here it comes.
Maybe you have to use Twitter.
Okay, thank you. I'd probably be pretty sad at that. I'm not very good. Okay. My name is Halima Ali Al-Qadi. I'm actually from the US, but I've been living in Qatar for about 8 years now. And I recently completed my master's in educational leadership, and my final internship that I did in that program was I was trying to establish partnerships between local businesses and schools, and I was working in particular with high school, a girls' high school here. And also I was trying to start an entrepreneurial education sort of in the school, working with the business department. They split in high school. They have certain programs you can choose, business, sort of like humanity type sort of things, and like sciences, okay? So I ran into a bit of problems when I was trying to go through this program, which I thought was not really that innovative, but pretty basic, okay? But I guess maybe it's a bit innovative or new and in this area. So one of the problems I ran into is that with the businesses and starting businesses, they had a hard time thinking of students, even high school students, as being ready to do things in like work-based learning programs, okay? And I'm thinking even junior high school students and even upper elementary can start getting into these things, but it's a very new concept. And also I had a problem trying to really to think of us as equal partners. That I'm not here. We're not here to provide just somebody that might be a future employee of yours. Although that might happen, okay, and it's in your interest to get involved because you're working towards I don't know if you know anything about the 2030 goals that or that Qatar has and for working for. So there are all these things, and there are a lot of reasons. There's Qatarization and all these things that get in.
The question that you wanted to ask.
Okay, so how do you see that there's a problem with the businesses and in the partnership idea? Do you see that there's a problem in businesses and education really meshing? Not one thinking of it. Okay, I'm looking at it only from my perspective, and the other one I'm only looking at it from mine.
Let me have a very quick go at that, and then I think I want to invite maybe both of you to reflect on what you were talking about in the earlier part of your intervention about making sure that women are involved in this whole process, particularly in this region. So I can't speak for, I guess, the particular experiences that you've had, but in most of the parts of the world where I have worked, I've ceased to see a problem in business working with education. Mostly I find educators extremely generous, open-minded, and they're looking for inspiration and help from wherever they can take it. If they get disappointed, if something goes wrong in the relationship, I think they're wise enough to know and to walk away. So I think we need to move beyond the suspicion that somehow business will contaminate education or that educators will water down business drives. I think unless we get this relationship right and working everywhere, we're going to really lose out. And certainly some of the best experiences I've had of transformational education have been business influenced. I'm sure there are many others that aren't. But let me just go back then to Arif and maybe Ponce after Arif. How do you see this challenge of making sure that the world we're talking about, better schooling, entrepreneurial opportunities, is opened up to women, particularly in this region, as well as to men?
Yeah. I have just one comment for Halima. We are not speaking the same language, unfortunately. The huge corporates and the business who are investing in education, they are speaking one language. NGOs and educational sector, they are speaking another language. And the entrepreneurs themselves, they are far away from the two approaches. For business, it's money. For educators, it's skills and knowledge. For entrepreneurs, it's something inside them, motivate them to initiate new initiatives and to do something. And it's not necessarily money. I met during the last 10 years at least 400 or 500 hundreds of young entrepreneurs in Palestine. Try to help them to register, if it's scientific and industrial, to register new patents, to create new companies. We have succeeded in 12 out of the hundreds. Because suddenly, and I don't know if it's by mistake or by luck, they had this combined skills between business. They succeeded to speak the three languages of the three parties, which all of them speaking English. But it's very, very different and various approaches. Women in entrepreneurship, especially in the region, it's very important because as a result of the reality and the society which we are living in, conservative, and it's going all the time to this direction, which I personally see it as a mess, but this is the reality. Women in science in Palestine, there are much success than men. We have a lowest dropout percentage among girls in the schools. We have high performances for women in universities. And now, in the last years, we have more companies established by women as entrepreneurs and innovative companies more than men. Now, if they can make it to the real business, I believe yes, but we have to work very closely to change the traditions and the mentality of parents and other stakeholders to give the platform for women to success and to go forward.
That's very encouraging. And Ponce, do you see any particular barriers in terms of entrepreneurship to women becoming involved? And if you do see such barriers, what do you think we ought to do about it?
Well, I'd like to go back to her question first. So I think more than changing the mindset of businesses, you also need to change your mindset. I think at the core of social entrepreneurship is the acceptance that everyone has self-interest, and that's okay. And these businesses also have their own motivations. As for us, for example, we are funded by Starbucks Foundation, but the self-interest that we are providing for them is that the NGOs that they're providing funding, they're the ones that are in need of our help. So we help those NGOs that they fund. So we are answering to a pain that they are providing. I guess for you, you need to, I guess, find what those corporations' motivations are that can be provided in exchange by the education system. I guess in the Philippines, for example, there's this big boom of call centers, business process outsourcing, but not many Filipinos are as fluent as we'd like to speak English and take on these jobs. Probably these corporations, for example, can fund initiatives of skills capacity building for schools in training and all those stuff. But again, it's at the core of it, it's answering to a need of that corporation. It's about finding, I guess that's my point.
Good.
But with regards to the women part, I'm okay. Let's just next question. I don't know the answer. So.
Okay. I think we are going to need to wind up in a moment. But before we do, I just want to take one question that's come into my screen, which is short and to the point. I'm going to throw it to Araf. Jane Owen asks us, how can digitally illiterate adults survive in a digital working world? And it's a very good question. I wonder what you think about that from your perspective.
Oh, you know, it's very complicated, I think, because using technology and digitalizing all of our life is one thing, and utilizing technology for better life is another thing. Now, what we are trying to do is to using technology in everything. Even in this session, you encouraged the audience to send SMS and to tweet instead of talking to each other. The new generation face this challenge. You know, they are not seeing the trees. They are not walking in the streets. They are not really interacting with their parents. They are not being part of the human civilization and culture. And all of this for using technology to be advanced. It's not for utilizing technology to make life easier. So this debate, it's another debate, but it's very important to be aware as parents and as leaders of any educational institution or sector, that yes, we want technology, we want digitalization, we want to use all of the 0.2 technology, and we want to cooperate with Cisco, Intel, Microsoft, and all of the big companies who are motivating using the technology, but we want it to serve us, and we don't want to be servant for it.
Thank you. And I suppose, in the end, we have to make sure that the next generation of adults does not become digitally illiterate by creating this better experience for them at school. So just to sum up and to try and pull together some of the things we might have talked about, I think we're seeing a need to put these higher order capabilities like problem solving and critical thinking at the heart of school systems. We think that if we do that, we'll be equipping a generation of students with the skills to survive in pressured working environments. These are the entrepreneurial skills. It must make sense to think, how can we begin to join up educational experiences to support this idea, the primary phase, the secondary phase, the tertiary phase. It would be a tragedy to leave young children, to equip young children with these higher order capabilities, and then to put them on ice while they do very traditional things in the latter part of secondary and tertiary. And then finally, I suppose we're talking about that learning society idea, and how do you equip people to go on learning all the way through life, as, to go back to what we said right at the beginning, people cycle through multiple jobs and new challenges, often into their 7th or even their 8th decade. And how do we do all of that evenly rather than just in the most wealthy parts of this world? How can we make that a common experience for everyone in the 21st century? I think that's it. I think we've overrun, and I think it must be lunchtime. So thank you all very, very much for being here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of WISE.
Thank you.